The sprinkler.
Welcome to the David Sabine Tour.
Well,
We renamed it. We may rename Agile Tour to David Sabine Tour.
we even renamed the Facebook page.
Yeah, it's now David Sabine Montreal.
Well, I'm happy to be, I guess, an honorary sprinkler.
Yeah, well, thank you. Thank you. Do you know why I'm saying this?
No?
He's giving 3 conferences
Wow,
today.
it's totally
That's
amazing.
why I'm saying this. You must be like, why is he saying this?
No, no.
It's a busy day.
Yeah.
Like I said, I submitted a few ideas. The organizers of the committee apparently liked the ideas. And
Except the Phoenix Project.
except the Phoenix payroll catastrophe. That's right. That's the one that I think they
Oh,
didn't
the-
accept here.
How are you involved with that?
I'm a taxpayer.
So you're deeply involved there.
I'm not involved with it.
Okay, you weren't involved. You weren't the Agile coach of the Phoenix Project.
No, but I would like to meet that person. No,
I don't think he existed.
I became interested in that problem because I remember I think it was 2015 in the summer,
Yep.
there was a massive privacy breach with 300,000 employee records that were leaked.
Yeah.
And that's when I became aware. And then I just followed the news over time, and the new CIO that was hired,
Yeah.
Alex Benet, was saying good things, and I became interested, like, oh, maybe they're really going to do something different here.
Yeah.
So my talk in Ottawa was an examination of the history of the Phoenix payroll catastrophe, and then an examination of the current replacement project,
Yes.
and the activities that they've done so far in the past 2 years on that initiative,
Okay.
and then a comparison to see, are they actually doing anything differently now?
And
Well, I don't see anything different in terms of the way that they're procuring, the way they're spending budget, the way that they are. Yeah, I think we're in for another catastrophe.
it sounds like the definition of insanity.
It does.
Doing twice the same mistake?
Yeah.
You know, there's an old saying, I think, and I learned this from John Gall's book,
Yeah.
the Systems Bible. He says, if Detroit makes it, it must be an automobile. Okay, so if our government finances it, it must be a waterfall.
Yes.
Yes.
I think that's true.
Did you think that we can change it?
Well, I think there are
Okay, they tried
ways
it.
that we could do differently. We could do this differently. Smaller iterations, smaller projects, maybe smaller experiments. But they're on the path to another mega project.
Okay.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah. Why am I not surprised? Oh, well. Whatever.
But we will not
Let's-
have a conference on that topic today.
Yeah, well, let's-
it will be the...
Let's go from sand to messy.
Sure.
Yeah. One of your conferences is the messy business of Agile at scale.
Yes, that was this morning.
Oh, you
already.
gave it already?
Yeah.
How did it go?
Well, great. I think a lot of good feedback, a lot of interest. It was full.
Yeah.
So I really appreciate everyone that came, and even those that stood at the back. So yeah, this was a topic which I became interested in, this problem that we have in the Agile community, because about a year ago, I was sitting with an executive vice president within a client that I was working with, and he said to me, David, I have to make $1.2 billion in revenue this year.
Okay.
I'm putting 4 boats in the water. I don't know which one is going to make it. And then not long after, like within the same week, I remember having another conversation with the vice president who said, our revenues are down 4% this year.
Yeah.
Our board has told us that we all have to downsize. How do I figure out which 60 people to fire?
Start with you guys.
And I realized,
Them are fighting words.
yeah, get rid of the Agile coaches. No, I realized that like a lot of us in the Agile community don't like to talk about who to fire.
Yeah.
And is there any advice from the Agile community with respect to that problem? And
So that's one of the things that Agilists don't like to talk about.
yeah, so I
Firing
decided
people.
to put together this talk around questions that Agilists don't like to talk
They
about.
try to avoid.
Yeah.
And getting people fired is one of them.
How to fight?
How to fire, yeah.
Yeah, who?
Who, yeah.
Right? On what ground? Like, how do we do this?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The project management community has all kinds of responses to that, which is what you do is you go to Jira and you measure all the story points per person, and
You fire the
and
one
you
at the
measure
bottom of the list.
productivity per day, and
David is being facetious. I love it. I love it. Keep it. I have competition here.
but that is a common response.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Uh,
absolutely.
And I don't think I think we can elevate that discussion, and I think the Agile community has some important advice to give in those circumstances. So the advice I gave in that particular question, go ask the teams.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Like, as uncomfortable as that is, every team has the spectrum of contributors, and some are really engaged and really they're great contributors, and others are not engaged, and they got half their, maybe they've got a foot out the door already. They're looking for other work already. There are ways, and you have to trust the subjectivity of the team members.
Subjectivity of the team members.
As
opposed to objectivity of the team members.
There's no quantitative data that's going to show the vice president who's contributing and who's not.
Okay, story points don't work.
Story points don't work. Hours on project doesn't work.
No, absolutely not.
Number of project, So there are some difficult questions for which the Agile community needs to.
So we could ask Sandy Mamoli to write a second book.
Yeah.
Self-deselection.
Wow. Or self-selection. Who's to fire?
Yeah, there you go.
That's actually part of the answer, is help make it possible for people within an enterprise to move around. Right? People are self-organizing. They will select their way in and out of teams, whether based on their own motivations or their what's right for them at this time.
Yeah.
It's often very difficult for people to move from one team they don't like to another initiative that they would like. Could we make that easier?
Yeah.
That's a related topic.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So in your description, you talk about these. We need to start having serious answers. How do you define a serious answer versus a non-serious answer?
Well, that's a good question. So
He gave me that question earlier,
but he asked it much more in an intelligent way.
I asked it in English. That's the only difference.
So it's always more intelligent in English than in French.
Not true. It's just, but I do appreciate that you're speaking English for me.
Yeah, no.
I imagine most of your listeners are French. Would that be accurate? Or bilingual?
Our 8 listeners are French. Yes.
More of our podcast is in French, so
it's mostly French. Yes.
Well, I do appreciate it. I always feel like I need to disclaim.
No.
Because I grew up in Saskatchewan, where access to French immersion was impossible. Actually, like at the time that I was in middle school was around the time that Pierre Trudeau's budgeting for French immersion programs was just being disseminated. And I feel like the generation that just followed me probably benefited more than I did.
I feel I communicate better in English than I do in French, so I'm always happy when it's in English. It's fantastic.
Okay. Okay, so back to the question.
That was a delay tactic.
Yeah, you just want time to reflect.
Wait a second.
Okay, so let's propose that an Agile coach is faced with a really serious business problem.
Yeah.
Like, I have to make 1.2 billion in revenue this year.
How can I do it?
How do I make sure? Like, how do I make smart bets versus these 4 boats that I'm putting in the water, and I don't know which one is going to make it? That's a very serious business problem. I've never made $1.2 billion. What advice do I really feel that I can give to this executive?
Yeah,
I don't know.
Well, what I fear happens a lot, that the Agile community can come up with all kinds of platitudes for that. Oh, it's all about mindset. That's not going to fly.
It's a little soft.
It's a little soft. Or here's a framework.
Put it safe and you will make 1.2 billion.
Yeah. Right. Like, which is funny. I was commenting. I've noticed this pattern. Maybe you've noticed it too on the social media, like LinkedIn and Twitter and such. That you see these wonderful photos of all these people gathered for PI planning.
Yeah, 300 people in a room. Yes.
300 people in a room. PI planning. I never see the photos of the release.
Oh, it's
a funny question.
Well, the first day is fantastic. You know why? We're not late yet.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're right on time.
Yeah, we've not failed yet.
Yes, we've not failed yet.
But I think
that's a really good observation. Yeah. I think I will comment from now on, and I'll quote you.
Okay.
Yeah. You see the beginning. Show us the end.
Yeah. Show us what happens 3 months later or 6 months later, and so executives, I think, they're just inundated with frameworks or nice diagrams about Agile mindset, and they're not getting from Agile coaches the best that the community can offer.
What can we offer? Well, we're both Agile coaches here. Do you define yourself as an Agile coach also? What do you define yourself as?
don't
question and a
particularly
question.
like the
Yeah, sorry.
term, actually. Other people have defined me that way. I think, so with my most recent client, I think on my contract, it was written Agile Practice Guide.
Okay.
I'm starting to like
So you're a guide, not a coach.
engineering performance coach.
Engineering performance coach.
That's
like-
interesting instead
Yeah.
of agile coach.
Because frankly, I no longer know what agile coach means. I think that this term has been appropriated and applied in so broad a context
Yep.
that
Yep.
it's. I understand McKinsey just released an article about this.
Okay.
There's no. Say what you will about certifications, but there's no standard understanding of a coach, what the role is or should be, what skills are required for that.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I define myself sometimes that way. Because if you call me Dave, I'm not going to correct you and say no, it's David. But if you call me an agile coach, I'll say yeah, okay, I'm an agile coach.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I'm kind of proud to be called an agile coach. I'm good. I'm good with agile coach.
Good.
Yeah, it's been a nice experience so far.
Well, and you wear the badge well, and I think
Thank you.
you've got.
I want to
you've
know
earned-
David Sabine said I wear the badge well.
You can reuse it since
I'm
you have
going to
it
quote you
recorded.
again.
Well, you've I think earned a certain level of credibility
Thanks.
as a coach,
Yeah.
and like, which is. So, by the way, it's really an honor to finally meet you, right? Like, we've never met in person.
Feelings mutual. Trust me.
But
Well,
we've
some kind of bromance was started.
Yeah, it's
like
a
that.
bromance here.
I can let you
Hi,
more
David.
spaces.
How are you?
well, and Matthew, I've just
first
learned
time that we-
recently
yeah.
of you, but I've been watching your work online for a long
thank
time.
you.
Yeah.
I'm a little embarrassed, but hey, cool.
So if someone asks me how I define my work or myself within my work, I say I'm a professional Scrum trainer.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So with this detour, I forget what the original question was.
The serious answer versus the funny or non-serious answers.
Yeah, what are these things that we should be saying or asking as a coach that we're not today?
One of the very difficult categories of questions that business leaders have is how to compare teams.
Yeah.
And so often I hear, well, don't. Just
Yeah.
don't compare teams. I don't think that's realistic.
Yeah.
So one of the questions that I posed this morning for the room was a conversation I was having with a vice president.
Yeah.
It was actually a SVP who said, we spent $18 million last year as an investment in our agile teams.
Yeah.
How do we know that they are better than our non-agile teams? They don't yet have a way of comparing, and they're looking for a way. Right?
Yep.
And they're going to look for that comparison, whether we help them with that or not. And I think we should help them with that. And so I think my advice to her was talk to the stakeholders of the teams.
Okay.
Find out whether those business stakeholders, the internal customers, let's say, do those customers feel that they've had good response with the teams? Are they collaborative? Are the teams open to their input? Are they getting lots of, is there high levels of transparency?
Are they delivering software?
Are they delivering software?
Quality software?
Are they delivering on the mandate that was asked
Yeah.
of them? And talk to the people in the teams, particularly those that were in those non-agile groups and now are in the agile
Yep.
environment. They would
Yeah,
have an
do
interesting
you feel
comparison.
like staying in the organization because you're working in an agile way, or do you feel like leaving the organization because
That's
you're
a
working in
great
agile?
question.
Yeah.
And what has been your observation of both
Yeah.
environments? How would you compare them?
That is expensive.
and
It takes time to ask those questions to all the people.
And it takes time and money to hire new people.
it sure does.
It takes time too.
So, but my advice fundamentally was you need to trust the qualitative subjectivity that you're going to get from your stakeholders and from your staff.
Okay.
You need to trust that because you don't have a large enough data set yet to look at quantitative outputs,
Yeah.
right? Like they were looking for stats and data and
Yeah.
productivity points and
We manage by numbers.
we manage by numbers, but those numbers you don't have a large enough data set yet. The richer information that you're going to get about your investment is going to be the subjectivity of the staff and stakeholders that are involved. So,
Yeah.
like, I think we do have a good response to big questions like that.
to offer.
to
Yeah,
offer.
yeah. But we
And-
don't.
And too often, that executive would have been met with platitudes
Mhm.
or frameworks or, yeah.
Interesting. Interesting.
yeah.
All right. Thanks. I'm processing all the information. It's fantastic. It's fantastic. How did you feel after your session? Because we've been asking the question, how do you think you're going to feel after your session?
Yeah.
And we will ask it for your next session, but for the previous session, how did you feel?
Yeah.
Well, I felt good. There were a few people that came up right away and wanted to talk, which is always a good sign.
It's always a
Yep.
good sign, yes.
I think.
What is one of the questions that you got after the...
Okay, there was one participant.
I'm asking too many questions at the same time. Eh?
Yeah.
sorry.
One participant
I'll put my hands
came
on
up
your
and actually
shoulder when you do
offered
it.
some advice for me, which I also love, like some great feedback, which will help me expand the concept for the next presentation
Okay.
that I do in the future. But
Yeah.
he identified a whole other category of questions that executives have, and
Okay.
the Agile community tends to avoid, or we don't yet have a good response for, and that is with respect to professional development.
Mhm.
Yes, that's true.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
the progression of
Career.
employees through
That's
a development path,
That is a tough one.
a learning
Yeah.
path.
Yeah.
We can throw certifications at them. We can try to tell executives to avoid power hierarchies.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Like you don't have to promote your best developer into the role of architect or engineering manager.
Mhm.
Because they're a good developer doesn't mean they're going to be a good
Yeah.
manager.
Yeah.
But maybe that is a path that person would like to see. And
Mhm. Yeah, that is a recurring issue.
It-
I'm a
it's
Scrum Master today. What am I going to be in 3 years? A
I
Scrum
don't
Master
know.
plus plus?
Oh, yeah,
What does
well,
it mean?
The
Yeah.
best Scrum Master in the world.
And a lot of people think that going from Scrum Master to Agile Coach is a promotion, which
Yeah.
is BS.
Well,
But-
it's two different roles completely, in a sense. I agree with you there. It's not a progression.
Mm.
Or I'm a Scrum Master today, and I want to become a senior Scrum Master. I don't know what that means.
What it is. Yeah.
I
Or
want to be
Master
a,
of Scrum Masters.
I want to be a chief Scrum Master.
Yeah. Yeah.
Again, I don't know. Like, I think we can do better than that.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, okay. And what's your second session today? Did you have another question?
No,
Sorry,
no.
I'm cutting you off here. right,
Let's
there
continue
you go.
because your last question was about how do you feel about.
Oh, that's right. Kindly forgot about that one.
After your session, what was your feeling? So you almost avoid the question, but
Yeah.
maybe
My fault.
Huh?
So the next session, well, there's two questions on the
So,
table
but
right now. How do I
let's
feel about it?
start With
I'm looking
your
forward
past
to it.
session.
So the next session, I feel really good about.
Cool.
This
it
is going to be a lightning talk.
Okay.
So
Stop
it's
using projects and make products?
stop using projects to make
Wow.
products.
To make products, yes.
It's
Yeah.
a big topic again.
Mm.
Yeah, so this is along the path of, like, the no projects
Yeah.
hashtag, which I really agree that most project delivery organizations have fallen into essentially like a fiscal habit,
Mhm.
right? So the way that they dole out money is based on stage gates,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
that creates this sequence. And I've worked enough now with executives that are doing it differently,
Mhm.
and I'm seeing that it's really working well. So executives that are willing to finance product teams,
Okay.
right? Like, give them a run rate. No more of these project buckets, right? So-
Before you go any further, let's start at the base.
Okay.
The difference between a project and a product at a higher level.
Well, the word project implies that there's some kind of end state.
There's
that
a
we
beginning,
can-
a middle, and an end.
There's a beginning and an end, and
Okay.
stuff in between.
Okay.
This idea that we can predict the end state,
Mhm.
and
We
then
hope.
work backwards from that and build a plan
Yeah.
towards it.
A list of requirements, and the goal is to answer to all those requirements.
Right.
Yeah.
Which just over and over again fails. And there's so much data that shows how, the extent of those failures.
Mhm.
The Phoenix payroll is one of the greatest examples of
Never heard of it.
big failure. Well, that's
Just
because
rewind the podcast just a little bit. And
if you've never heard of it, it's because colossal errors often go unnoticed.
It's so big.
Yeah. That's another John Gall piece of wisdom. So
So yeah, so a project, the basic goal is to predict what you're going to deliver and deliver the whole thing, whether it's right or wrong.
And
Yes.
if you think about, like, what is the end of a product?
Mm.
it's when we
No
unplug
idea.
that product, when we close it, when it's
Right, and
no
why-
more.
why
Your
would we
return on,
unplug
on
it?
investment is not there anymore.
Yeah.
Right,
But
so-
it's
so-
not predictable. We don't know when
We
it
don't
will be
know.
the end of the product.
Yeah.
So to approach product development as though it's a project is irresponsible, in my opinion. And if there's a project manager out there that's looking for a risk mitigation strategy, they're going to find it in iterative and incremental development.
Yep.
And they're going to find it by throwing out most of their critical path planning technique.
Yeah.
Just get rid of it. Just stop,
Yeah.
because there is no critical path.
There's just a path.
There's just a path.
There's a
That's
journey.
right. As is journey,
Learning
yeah.
journey.
Yeah.
So this lightning talk is really about that difference. I'd like to tell a story, actually. I'll try to keep it brief. There was a man in one of my Scrum classes a couple of years ago. He's a vice president in a big bank, and he came to me after the class with a problem, and he said, "David, I have 300 people that report to me. The morale is on the floor. You're talking about cross-functional, high-performing teams. I just don't know how to reconcile this."
Okay.
Right? And I asked him, and I don't know if this was the smartest question to ask, but I wanted to have a conversation with him. So the question I think I asked him was, okay, there's these 300 people. What holds them together?
Mhm.
Well, I don't know. We're all in the same department, he said. I said, well, that's not good enough.
That's
Right.
one thing.
The
Think harder.
paycheck.
Think harder.
Think harder. Yeah. What holds these people together? Like, what do they find? What do they have in common that makes them a department or a unit or? Well, I don't know. They're always on different projects. You know, we're doing all these different projects all the
So
time.
there we go. We're finding root causes here.
Yeah, exactly. And we got to the point where I realized, and I said, okay, let me ask you a question. I guess that your engineers show up every day and they log into their computer and they do what? And he said, well, generally we're just working with SAP. We maintain SAP for our enterprise.
Okay.
Okay, that's interesting because now I can see it. I can see that your engineers show up, they log into their computer, and they write code for SAP. They're making APIs or customizations or plugins or reports and whatnot, and then they log those 8 hours that day into this project code.
Okay.
They show up the next day. They log into their computer. They're working with SAP. They're making plugins and customizations and reports and so on.
Yep.
And then they log those 8 hours into this other project code.
So what's the difference between those two projects?
Nothing. So the engineer sees a product.
Yep.
They're working with a product.
Yeah.
If you're working with digital systems, you're working with product.
Yeah.
To wrap project budgets around that, I think imposes these weird constraints, like a constraint around wish lists of requirements, or a bucket of budget for this period of time. And I think that whole pattern just needs to go away.
Okay.
Okay.
So that will be your lightning talk. Your lightning talk.
I just
at
So you basically gave you lightning talk right now.
maybe we could give you
So
the
you-
SD card and you can
you
replay
have a
it,
crowd behind you right now, so you can leave now.
or you just can replay that podcast and go take a coffee instead of do your lightning talk.
And your third session, I actually referred to it on LinkedIn.
Yes, thank you.
Because I recorded a podcast with a friend of mine who's she works at SAP.
Does she?
That she
Okay,
does.
yes.
And and she's deeply into this agile documentation. She gave a conference, something summit, something. And see how much I would know about it.
Okay.
And there's David Sabine is giving a session on agile documentation. Let's do a podcast.
Wow.
So there you go. And I
Another-
linked the
Thank
two.
you.
I'll link the two together.
I remember
Yeah.
that actually, and that's when I became aware of Le Sprinkler.
Oh, there
It was the first sprinkler.
Yeah,
Wow.
it was actually a marketing strategy, but
Okay.
and it worked.
Obviously, we see it right now.
So the art of agile documentation, the art of agile comprehensive documentation.
The word comprehensive is pretty.
Over working software.
Wow, I'm a little bit confused right now.
There's an introduction for you.
Yeah. There's
Because I keep bugging my friend.
Sure.
I said, my job is that you don't have a job anymore.
And
But she gets upset.
that's interesting.
then
There's a real fear around that, isn't there?
Yeah. I feel there shouldn't be. I just say to be.
Well,
funny,
documentation
but-
is certainly different in agile environments.
Yes.
and there needs to be a focus on the documentation that is valuable. And a lot. So I remember being with Jeff Sutherland in a conversation, and something he said really struck me. He said, Scrum spins off a lot of data, like just quite naturally. And it's true. Also, development, like coding, spins off a lot of. There's a lot of artifacts and metadata that just happens as you go, like commit messages and change logs, and I think that these are really important documents to work with. And like, there's this myth that Agile teams don't document, but in my experience, Agile teams produce beautiful and valuable documentation. We just don't bother with all the wasteful stuff. So how do we filter out the waste? There was a great book by James Shore and Shane Warden, if you know it. It's The Art of Agile Development, which, by the way, I think they're working on another edition.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah.
It's good to know.
So there's a paragraph, like literally one paragraph in their book about documentation that really opened my thinking on the topic. And it was around that paragraph that I've created this workshop.
And what does that paragraph say?
Well, essentially, that we can think in terms of a few categories of documentation. So there's like planning docs and some work in progress docs. Like maybe we sketch a template on the whiteboard or a UML diagram on a diagram on the whiteboard. Maybe we take a photograph of it, or maybe we erase it and it's fine. And then there are there's the actual product, right? Software product is
that's the main artifact.
Like your whole repository is a document. And along with that are these metadata like commit messages and pull requests and bug
test
reports
cases,
and test cases. Also, there's these handoff materials, right?
Okay.
Like a great example of handoff material would be the IKEA assembly guide.
Okay.
Right?
So the user manuals.
The user manual, excuse me, and how to maintain and how to install and all that stuff. There tends to be a lot of focus on the planning stuff. And in an Agile community, I think we ought to keep that stuff really lightweight and disposable. It's not valuable. It helps us to make decisions and maybe gain cohesion in a team. But ultimately, we need to be comfortable to throw it away.
We can trash it at the end of the project.
It's like a user story. It's a placeholder for a conversation, but then maybe you can discard it.
And we need to be willing to throw it out, particularly when new information arises, right? But if we work too hard to document the planning material,
don't want to trash it.
We won't want to trash it. Cognitive bias arises, and we want to.
I work too hard on that document. I want to.
What's the bias I'm looking for here? When you're so hardened into your decision that any information that you receive that might negate your decision.
Cognitive bias.
Confirmation bias.
Confirmation bias.
That's the phrase I'm looking for. So to lessen that risk, we help to make that type of documentation more disposable, more lightweight. So a user story is it's only what we can fit on a note card.
Right. And make it smaller if it doesn't fit.
That's right.
That's what we used to say.
That's right.
That's why we make it.
And actually, during reviews, before Jira and all that, actually during the ceremony of it, when we used to call it ceremony, a sprint review, we would actually tear up.
It's pretty significant when we do it.
Part of the.
Because everything that surrounded, all the decisions that surrounded that idea are now codified in your product. And represented in the test cases, for example. Like all the behaviors that we implemented are right there in our end-to-end tests or in our unit tests. And those are documents that are version controlled with the product increment. And those are valuable. And sorry.
Go ahead.
In Ottawa, I attended a talk with Alistair McKinnell, and I'm going to forget her name, but
I do that all the time.
A product owner that works with Alistair at Nulogy. And the two of them were presenting on the value that they have found in spec by example. It was so refreshing to hear a product owner who doesn't have a development background whatsoever talk about how, like, at first she was really frustrated because it was taking the team time to learn about these techniques and develop the test beds and so forth.
Is this related to BDD and gherkins?
Exactly. Then, but once, like, about 3 weeks passed, and she had this experience where she presented to her customers the work that they had recently created, and all that she did was ran the tests for them,
Fantastic.
and it automated, and the
Yeah.
just the confidence that she found in her
Yeah.
customer rose, and the trust that they then expressed in the team.
Mhm.
It changed her outlook completely.
Oh, yeah.
It's wonderful to see product owners really sold on these types of engineering
Oh, yeah.
practices.
When I was a developer and we used the fitness,
Yeah.
it was fantastic.
Yeah.
It was fantastic. When the PO would write their specs in Confluence,
Yes.
and the test would fail and we would get an email, it was great.
Yeah.
It was great.
It is fantastic
Yeah,
when
yeah.
teams can achieve that level of
Yeah. Tough to maintain if you're not done well, if you're not testing the right, if you're not
At
doing
the right level.
at the right level
Yeah.
and all that. But yeah, it was a fun experience. Have you ever tried this approach for documentation? Stop doing it and see who complains.
have I ever?
I do.
Have you?
I do it on a regular basis.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's just stop doing it. And then for 2 sprints, let's say, if we're working
Sure.
Scrum,
And we'll see.
very often, I'll give a number, 95% of the time, nothing.
Yeah.
Nothing happens.
And then you know that document doesn't
Nobody
have a
reads
value.
it. Nobody reads it, and it's out of date in about half an hour anyway. So
Yeah.
might as well stop.
Yeah.
I did have a similar experience with a team recently who they were asked for a particular document, a particular kind of report.
Mhm.
The teams ask it.
No, the teams were asked
Okay,
to
okay,
do
okay.
it.
To do it. Okay.
Yeah.
5 of the 5 teams didn't do it,
Okay.
and nobody complained.
So
Like so, the
They
request, which seemed urgent and really important,
Hurry
turned-
up and wait.
turned out to not be important at all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So they were asked to report on, I guess it was individual story points, individualized story points, and all the teams,
Individualized story for
So
again,
story point per person.
each member of the team, how many story points have they delivered?
12,
25.
25.
So much.
Five of the
twice
teams
faster than me.
decided not to report it.
For the record, for people who are listening, story points are only to generate conversations.
Yes.
Period. Let's leave it at that.
Like other kinds of
Anything
documents, we
else?
can trash it at the end.
Anything else you're using it for, it's like not made for that. It's just to generate conversations. Thank you for listening. Have a good day.
It will be small clip for.
I think they're kicking me out.
There's a security agent coming for you.
So where will document? How much time we got? Okay, 2 minutes left.
Oh shit!
Let's ask that question.
Let's ask that question.
How will you feel by
After
the end of the day?
those two?
Well, by the end of the day, so one that I learned as a speaker at the Agile Tool Montreal, we receive a bottle of wine
Oh,
Mhm.
as a
Mhm.
gift.
oh,
Mhm.
So how I'll feel at the end of the day, I think I'll be ready for a nice glass of red wine.
oh. That's good.
I hope I'll feel also connected to a whole bunch of new people that I'm meeting here. Like, just look around.
Yeah.
I'm afraid on your cameras they're going to see only the backdrop, but there's people everywhere. It's a beautiful venue. A lot of folks that came to my session this morning, made sure to come and introduce themselves to me afterward.
Yeah.
I hope that continues. So how I'll feel at the end of the day is exhausted and simultaneously energized.
And
You will.
you're giving 3 sessions, so you have 3 bottles of wine, so you might feel drunk also.
Only one bottle.
Yeah, you can take only one bottle at a time.
Do you? I thought you
And I have a trouble. I have to fly tomorrow.
Ooh.
Okay.
So either I have to put it in my checked luggage or I have to.
Where are you flying
Share
to?
it.
You don't still live in Saskatchewan?
No, I live
Yeah.
in London, Ontario now.
London? Okay. Yeah.
For the past almost 2 years.
Yeah.
Before that, I was in Toronto for 6 years. Before that, Alberta for 5.5 years.
Oh, really? Okay.
Before
Okay.
that, Saskatchewan and Arizona.
Oh, my brother and sister live there in Alberta. Yeah.
Oh,
Well,
yes.
We need to close this up. So
Yep.
our next guest is waiting
Great.
right there.
Yep.
But to reach you,
How
LinkedIn.
can we reach
Yeah,
you?
LinkedIn, just David Sabine.
Yeah.
Twitter, Dave Sabine.
Okay.
My website is scrum.works.
Okay. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
really thankful that you've arranged this.
Thanks
and
to you.
thanks
Thank
for
you
having me on
very
the show.
much. It was very interesting.
I'll promote it and share the links. And so thank you very
and
much.
you'll be online soon.
Yes.
Yeah. Great.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
Eric, Matthew.
Thank you.
Have fun this afternoon.
Okay, thank you.
Bye.
Bye.